Like the mouth, the moon, and the soil in the earth, breaking through the rocks, growing wild and tall till the buds begin to pop. So pack me in a bowl or roll me in a spliff. While you're breaking me down, you can feel your fingers stick.
Hey, this is Ryan Heron, cannabis writer and advocate from Portland, Oregon.
Hey, I'm Amanda Breeze. I'm here in Toronto.
And we're here to talk about all the fun stuff around one of our favorite plants, cannabis. For this whole season, we're focusing on people with cool jobs in the industry, people who have kind of taken on cannabis and turned it into their careers. Today, we have on Chris Romaine, Kandid Kush, as you probably know him from Instagram and High Times covers and everything else. Stoked to have you here today, Chris.
Hey, man. Thanks. Pleasure.
So we're just digging in, talking about what you've been up to lately and kind of how you got started in the industry. Let us know where you're at right now.
Cool. I'm up in Truckee, California, a little north of Tahoe, about 6,500 feet elevation. It's a little chilly today, and came from Grass Valley earlier this week.
Very nice. Yeah, I'm loving your beanie and everything. Looks like a cozy place to like kick back and burn one.
Yeah.
So are you gearing up for harvest season, or what's brought you there?
More gearing down from harvest season. This year, I have, I think, 2 more shoots on the books in November. I just ended a pretty busy season bouncing around Northern California, pretty much nonstop for the last 2 months. A lot in Grass Valley, working with Humboldt Seed Company on one of their big mega pheno hunts, which was super epic. And just popped up here because I had some errands and I was close. So that's why.
Cool.
I'm jealous. I love Northern California.
Yeah.
I just love pheno hunts. So, I'm envious as well.
Yeah, no, it was really epic. I missed the first leg of it, which was more in Northern Humboldt. And I caught the second leg, which was down in the Grass Valley, Nevada City area. And that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I forget that up here in Oregon, everyone just pushes everything until the rains are like, you got to cut it down or it's going to be all mold, my man. So that's where we're at today. All of the rains are moving in. And I think most people have gotten to chopping so far. At least, the neighborhood plants, the little backyard stuff we have around here.
Although it does seem kind of early for harvest in California.
Yeah, everything that I was visiting seemed to be earlier, and also the season got started later. I know quite a few people didn't even get plants in the ground until July for the full term sun grown, at least. And so when we were going through the pheno hunt, the plants were still a little early, and so we were playing catch up on the photography, and I was able to tag along with Eric Nug Shots. A lot of people probably pretty familiar with him. And so him and I were capturing a lot of the pheno hunt together.
Oh, nice. So what does that look like? Describe what you were doing exactly for our listeners.
We would go visit select farms that were growing new varieties that Humboldt Seed is selecting the different phenos for to release in the future. The really exciting part about that this year is that they were hunting for triploids. So triploids have an extra chromosome and are sterile. So there wouldn't be any worry to have a male pop up in the field or a plant herm or get seeded or anything. And so along with these triploids, the plants are more vigorous and seemingly have greater trichome density and mature a little quicker. Yeah. And they just pop out at you. They're much bigger. Some of I didn't see some of the leaves of the first leg of the pheno hunt, but the leaves would be massive, Jurassic looking. It is really cool.
Damn, that sounds awesome.
Yeah. So there was a whole group of people along for the pheno hunt, and we would go to the different farms and everybody. I wasn't really a part of the selection part of things. I was more just documenting it, but everybody had their checklist of ratings for the different plants, and we would break off into groups, and the different groups would just wander throughout the different parts of the farms and making notes and documenting. And I was just bouncing around, photographing the behind the scenes of it. And then Eric and I would go back later and collect samples of the different phenos that were selected and then do our studio work with it.
Oh my God, that sounds so fun.
these live plants, like I guess you're taking a branch or two and not just like the
Yeah.
whole plants back to your shooting area.
Yeah, some of these plants, they're like the big Mendo monster, like 12, 13-foot plants. And so we're taking top colas that exhibit like the best characteristics for that phenotype, whether that's like the structure, the color. We're looking for symmetry depending on like the type of content that we're creating. And then from those finished samples, yeah, we cure them up and give them a try.
I mean, you have to, right? It would be a
right?
waste otherwise. Yeah.
I know, seriously. Yeah, so we smoked some of the first triploid herb the other night, actually. It's pretty cool.
I've never heard that word before. In all my, I've never ever heard that word before.
Yeah, so like other things that would be commonly known by that would be like seedless watermelon or bananas or other things that are like sterile.
Wow.
So they're not going to get seeded.
That is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it is for the market as well, right? I mean, we all know like cookies bag seeds were like such a thing in the like early 2000s where it was like gold if you got one. People were like trading them on overgrow.com and stuff. And so kind of eliminating that and saying like, okay, these are our genetics. We don't have to worry about somebody catching a seed or finding some lottery ticket type herb in your stash. So, I mean, I get it. The closer we get to cannabis being like less of a basement thing and more of like an agricultural product, we're seeing like really interesting breeding techniques and things like this. So, man, it's cool. I'm just trying to hang on and pay attention.
Yeah, it is a pretty interesting thing. I think inevitable for sure, and more targeted towards like the larger scale farms, or even, just like people who don't want to have to worry about like that one male that pollinates half their like grow and then seeds everything,
Yeah, that's such a huge thing, and partly why pheno hunting is so expensive to begin with, especially indoors. It's taking a lot of risks on when you're trying to grow craft cannabis, and you might have a whole seeded room just because the genetics term, you're not used to using them. You're not quite sure how far you can push a plant. So yeah, man, it's a whole thing. I think it's a useful tool for the industry. Let's say that.
Definitely.
So the samples that you're shooting are, I'm guessing, untrimmed, fresh samples, like fresh off the plant with its vibrant liveliness.
Typically, when I show up for like a shoot, the selection process is going through like the different rooms or gardens where I'm at with the owner or the lead grower, and we're looking for those different attributes on like the live plants. I don't typically shoot dried flower that much anymore, although I did that was how I got started in cannabis photography. So we'll take a sample that checks all the boxes and immediately keep it on water to keep it like drinking and plump and staying alive. Then I take that to my studio setup and manicure the plant, like prep it up, take off any like weird looking leaves or, insects are pretty inevitable on most organic things. Got some tweezers looking for whatever may be there, and then set it up for the shots depending on like what style of photography we're doing, whether that's the 360 degree type of motion photography or the macro or the super micro type of stuff.
Love that. And I love that you're working with the organic outdoor. Like, I'm an outdoor girly. I just think it has such a look to it. And I don't know, the idea of just like photographing the live plant is so dynamic and so much more exciting than just a dried nug. Of course, we love our nug shots, but the word plump resonates because I love that look when you're looking through photos of plants and you really see that gorgeous cola or whatever you're working with.
Well, not to mention like how many things had to go right before you call Chris in, right? You're like, oh, okay, we need this like photographed. We need like the memory of this preserved. So let's get the pros in here. And so like you already know like the weed is great by the time you're walking up to it.
Yeah. No, it's really cool. It's such a pleasure working with a lot of the genetic types of companies. And there's like another guy, Nate, Higher Heights in Mendocino, that I've been working with over the past few years. And I document a lot of his hunts too. And the colors are like what always captivate me. Like you'll have these pheno hoops that have just like all the different colors of fall. And it's so gorgeous.
And I also love earlier in the season when you get the pink hairs and they're just like that delicious magenta. We always called it grower's delight because like you only see it if you're the one growing because it usually fades out as the plant matures. So it's like there's just some of these moments that you can only catch when you're working with the live plants.
Totally. And speaking of those pink pistils, I was able to go work with Emerald Spirit Botanicals in Mendocino. Yeah, I'm pretty sure like Willits is Mendocino. They do all of their own in-house breeding and they work on like rare cannabinoids. So THCV plants, CBG, CBN, and stuff like that. And they have one of their cultivars, Pink Boost Goddess, which is a 1-to-1 THC to THCV plant that has really vibrant pink pistils. And I was able to do some really cool like 20x microscope photography on those. And so those will be coming out soon.
Oh, shit. Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah.
So does that mean you're entering editing season now? Is that what this is?
Oof. Yes. I am glued to the computer now. I would say like most of the work is within the editing. The photo shoots are pretty dialed now with process and getting all that done. But like if I'm shooting for 8 to 10 hours in a day of like mostly macro or micro work, you can count on that being like another like 60 to 80 hours of editing. Oof.
Holy, wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And it's a lot. Well, you know, that kind of like approach is something I want to talk about today. Recently, you've been, I don't know, complaining, commiserating, like talking about the Instagram police. Chris has got like, I don't know, 40,000 followers or something like that. And it's not your first account. I know that much. And you put a lot of time and energy into creating this art and having a very specific point of view. And then it just gets flagged like it's some teenager's picture of a weed plant. And it's very frustrating. And seeing you have to deal with that and thankfully like sharing some of that story with us. You know, I think everybody we've had on so far has kind of talked about their way of dealing with social media. I mean, let's not like bring the energy down too much, but like talk about that a little bit and how you have fought against it or had some success with that.
Yeah, totally. It's funny because I literally just made a post about this yesterday or the day before. So I made my Instagram account in 2016, and it was a place for me to post cannabis related content separate from my other photography. And that account took off organically. And I have organically grown just shy of like 40,000 followers. And I've made so many like rad connections, like globally. Like I've met people internationally traveling through Europe who I only met on Instagram. And then I would say 90% of my work comes from Instagram as well. Over the past, like, gosh, I don't know, like probably like 2 or 3 years now, like I've been like really censored on Instagram. And my account, it was about like a year ago, they just deleted my account without warning, without reason, without anything. And I was locked out of the account for 2 or 3 weeks. And I was able to find a friend who worked at Instagram, and he was able to get my page looked at by a person. And the person is like, well, this is just a photography account. They're not breaking any guidelines. This is how it is. And they just reinstated my account, thankfully. And the next day it was flagged and I'm warned to be taken down again through the AI monitoring or whatever. They just recommended that I delete all 1,400 or so posts that I had. I was like, well, shit, I don't want to lose the fucking account again. So I archived my entire feed. And then I decided to have a new approach. And that was like integrating like the other styles of photography I do, because like cannabis as a subject has been like later in my exploration of photography or career or whatever you want to call it. And I do all types of photography within cannabis, without cannabis. I'm always like shooting stuff. And I like storytelling and visual storytelling. And so I was like, well, you know, I'm just going to utilize the carousel and try to composite images and maybe trick the algorithm by layering things and like maybe having things not so obvious cannabis, right? Mm-hmm. And that seemed to be working for a little bit, although I think the follower base maybe didn't quite understand what I was doing right off the bat, which is like totally fine, right? So the engagement kind of lost in another way. But then I just started getting flagged over and over and over again for cannabis-related content. Since my account is verified, I have the access to Instagram support, which is very hit or miss. I think it's extremely subjective depending on like the type of support agent you start talking with. And I shared some of this on my latest post, and I shared some screen captures of chatting with Instagram support people who were in awe of my work and thought it was really cool and recognized me as a photographer and this and that. And then they just lifted all of the restrictions, and then a week goes by and then they're all back. And so it feels like a very gaslit situation, and being a creative, you know, spending time and like my passion and like this is like what my life is. And then I get told like, oh yeah, you are a photographer. This is this way and things are okay. And then I spend, you know, 10 hours making some post and writing up something and linking it to my blog and like all this stuff. And then it just gets flagged. And you're like, well, wait, I thought what I was doing was okay, you know? And so it's just this frustrating thing because I love photography and I love storytelling. And I love sharing the work and creating conversation and changing perspective and challenging views like that. And putting effort into that. Like, I'm not into just like posting like a weed picture and this is fucking grape ape. I put thought into it. And then when it all just gets censored and then I don't have any real explanation, but then I see other cannabis accounts that, you know, have millions of views and they started their page a year ago and they have hundreds of thousands of followers. And I just like don't understand what's happening.
You know, I always wondered if your account was verified, if you were able to get around some of these rules, because I've also seen other content creators with tons of followers with verified accounts who seem to like get away with posting weed pictures. This week I got super flagged, a ton of my posts. And so I've been trying to go in and same as you, archive some of the ones, even though it sucks because this is like, you know, you don't really want, I put the effort in and I did all, like, we all know it. You don't just post on social media in like a minute. You sit down for like quite a while and come up with the caption and which pictures and what order they're going to go in. It's so much work. And so it sucks. I'm sorry to hear that because I was hoping you would get away with it, having a verified account. In my head, that's what I thought was happening, but I guess that's not the case.
Well, it's crazy because Instagram has more personal information about me than I think any other thing in the world. They have my freaking EIN, they have my trademarks, they have my bank accounts for my business, they have my business licenses, they have pictures of me, they have my passport, my fucking ID, everything. Like I shouldn't have to have all of that stuff just to post pictures, you know, on a social media platform. And then they tell me I'm not who I am. And like a really frustrating thing is I recently came across my work being used without my permission to market some other cannabis brand. And so for the longest time, like I don't even reach out to the companies anymore. I'll just file an IP claim, right? It's just like the easiest way to go about it. And now I can't prove that it's mine. Instagram says it's not. I send them the raw information. I send the trademark information, everything. And they're like, nope, it's not yours. And it's just like, okay, well, then why would I continue to post my work on this thing? Like if other people can just take it and use it how they will.
Right. But like you said, so much of the business comes from the fucking social media.
Yeah.
And
I know
a lot of people switch over to LinkedIn, which has kind of turned LinkedIn into a bit of a weird, like, boomer vibe, to be honest. Really fucking cringe. But I've seen so much of the industry move on to LinkedIn because they're not censoring cannabis content at all.
Somebody just recommended that to me, but I'm a little like burnt out on trying to like social media hop or platform hop. And one of the biggest, you know, realizations, it wasn't even a realization because I preached it all the time. I just didn't apply it to myself. But that was like, don't put all your eggs in one basket. and you need to own your own content by having your own website. And so I've always had my own website, but it's more like cumbersome to constantly upload, and it doesn't get anywhere near the amount of hits or engagement and traffic, and you're battling SEO as like a drug platform or whatever, Kush, like KandidKush.com, like Google probably isn't stoked on that. And so I do put a lot of energy and time into my website, actually probably more than social media. And I have a blog that is hit or miss, depending on my mood. And I try to keep up with like a newsletter, but ultimately I think the frustrations from Instagram trickle down into the drive to want to publish things online in general. One of the really cool things is having an exhibit in New York that opened up earlier this year for me.
Cool.
Yeah, the THC NYC, right? I wanted to talk to you about that and how that really got kicked off and what that was like seeing your work like in person, like larger than life. I mean, I can only imagine.
Yeah. And so showing work in the real world tangibly isn't new to me. I've shown my work on much smaller scales, even before cannabis photography, in cafes or little art galleries or artist walks and stuff like that. And I've always really enjoyed that because you can connect with people on like different levels. And that's always been really, really cool. I was approached about a year and a half prior to the opening of THC, the House of Cannabis in New York City, which had its grand opening on 4/20 this year. I was brought in as a photographer that was going to have a gallery in a cannabis sensory exhibit history encompassing museum type of a thing. So that was really exciting. We worked on this project for about a year and a half prior to it opening. The narrative changed a little bit as the pieces like changed within it, as most projects happen. Now I have a Kandid Kush gallery featuring 8 of my prints that are 3 foot by 4 foot in size in light boxes. And there's about maybe a 4 foot vertical screen that has a 1.5 minute long loop that I created of the cannabis motion, starting at the whole cola going into the trichomes. The building is on Broadway and Howard in Soho in New York. And from the outside, you can see my images on the ground level where they used it for the wallpaper that wraps around the gift shop and coffee shop. And they have a glass blowing station and all this stuff. So the prints are 8 to 12 feet tall and they're along the mezzanine and stuff. It's pretty freaking epic.
Holy, that is.
So what's a better feeling, standing there with a $6 coffee in your hand, looking at the museum quality work you've done, or swatting mosquitoes in the bush in Jamaica, shooting some off the beaten path type garden shit? I don't know, man. Which is more your speed?
Oh, dude. So I actually fuck mosquitoes, man. I got dengue fever in Jamaica and it hit me on 4/21, the day after the exhibit opening. And I was just man, I am just sick from traveling, or I got COVID or something. Cause my lead up to 4/20 was I flew out of Reno to Kingston on April 1st to work on a project with Dr. Michelle Emanuel of the University of West Indies in Kingston. And then from there, I was there for just about 3 weeks, I guess. And then went from Kingston to New York for the opening of the exhibit there. And it was on 4/20. And I got there 4 or 5 days early and was kicking it around Greenwich Village. The weather was beautiful and it was cool to see all the people because I've been nomadic van living throughout this whole COVID pandemic thing. I don't know, all that stuff. And so seeing all the people in New York was really exhilarating and fun. And then, just got sick as shit on 4/21. Went to a quick care and they're oh no, your vitals are fine. You don't have COVID. You don't have strep. You don't have influenza. You should just rest. And I was all right. And so I'm trying to rest and stay hydrated, and just progressively got worse until I was admitted to the ER overnight. And then sure enough, had a bunch of blood tests. And a few weeks later, after the CDC got done testing my blood, confirmed it was dengue. Yeah, it was fucking nuts.
That's a fun letter to receive in the mail, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, by that time I was like on the mend, and I was pretty sure it was dengue or Zika just by the chain of events that had happened and my symptoms. But yeah, don't recommend that. Nearly died, lost like 15 pounds in 5 days. Yeah, it was brutal.
Oh my
So
God.
galleries are like more my speed, but I'm into the adventure travel. I'm going to Thailand in like a month and a half, so fingers crossed, no dengue there.
I've heard a lot of great things about the scene there. So,
Yeah.
hey, maybe we'll have you back on for like a mini episode. You could tell us about the trip.
Definitely.
Oh man,
Yeah.
Thailand, that is really exciting. What are you doing up there?
I've just been like putting out there that I want to go check out Thailand, Southeast Asia. I haven't been to that part of the world yet. The cannabis scene is popping off. I've had a few friends who have gone over there, made a connection with another traveler who's going to be spending 3 months in that area, and decided to tag along with her and check all that out. And just kind of see how it goes,
Oh, that sounds so fun.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it's a little mix of like what Amanda does, which is like, all right, I'm going to go get on a plane, or I'm going to go to the airport and figure out a plane to get on, versus someone maybe in Spain saying, hey, Chris, we really love your work. We'd love to have you out. So is it a little bit more like you got the travel bug and you try and find the opportunities there?
It's kind of like a mix. So the Jamaica project came about, well, if I rewind a little bit, I always wanted to be like a traveling photographer, and it's kind of really fascinating and interesting, like how this all came about, because I had a photo studio in Oakland. And then when COVID happened, I switched over to like a nomadic lifestyle to continue on the path of cannabis as a subject and being able to service people all over the West Coast, at least is how it was. And then it got brought out to the Midwest for a couple projects. And then I've been to Barcelona and I've done some photo work there. And that was in like 2019. And I had a little exhibit open up at a cannabis club there. Then traveled around Europe. Jamaica, I met Michelle in Spain at Spanibus in 2021, and we connected and vibed, and we're like, yeah, we got to like work on a project together. Just stayed in contact over the year, and he was like, you need to come out to Jamaica and we'll document cannabis around the island, work on some scientific peer-reviewed papers and then publish a book. And that's what we're currently working on right now. I try to allow opportunity to come into my life and see where it goes and unfolds. So finding work to help pay for the travels is along the lines. It's actually like way more affordable to travel outside of America.
Right.
And so going to Thailand is kind of a way to skip winter here in the van and save some money and explore a new place that I haven't been to, into cultures that I've been into. And then also see the cannabis internationally has been like really, really cool.
It's so exciting to see weed in other places. And as someone who also loves traveling for weed, I haven't figured out the money part of it yet, but it's true. It is cheaper to go literally anywhere than stay in Canada or visit the States. Mm-hmm. No matter where you go, it's always cheaper. Mm-hmm. But also to see what people are growing and what the community's like. I think Thailand, just because of its like unique climate and it's just so far from here, that would be such a cool place to explore.
The Thai like menus, everything I've seen to be really like racy, like what I know Thai weed to be, just kind of like straggly, like energetic sativas. And it's not, it's like mostly a lot of like cookie strains and a lot of what you're going to see on the West Coast. And like, those beans were pretty easy to get over there. And now we've got a bunch of very, very similar cultivars or copycats.
Yeah. I've heard that I need to travel more north, out like near Chiang Mai, and like go into the rural areas out there to find some like cool outdoor types of cultivations. When I was in Jamaica, there was like a pretty big mix of the types of weed that they were growing. And then also the cultivation practices were pretty dependent on the region you were in and like just like the part of the island, right? On the more I think it was like the eastern side, St. Thomas is like, it's kind of like Humboldt jungle or something, like very similar vibes, but like everything is like tropical. And so there's like banana trees and like just like everything was like very new to me, you know, like I saw a nutmeg tree. I've never seen that before. Like nutmeg grows in this kind of apple like fruit, and then it opens up. There's this like big seed with this vibrant red lacing around it, and yeah, it is like mind blowing to see.
Literally saw the picture of nutmeg fucking yesterday and I had no idea that's what it looked like.
Oh yeah. Well, that bright red stuff is called mace. It's a spice that is mostly used. If you're an American, you probably recognize it from hot dogs. That's where a lot of mace spice goes, is into American hot dog production. Yeah, yeah. I've had an obsession with nutmeg for a long time, but I'm still yet to see one in the wild. So that's rad.
I took one of the nutmegs back to the studio and did like some photos of it and did a little 360 on there, and it's on my Instagram too, if you want to check that out.
I'm immediately writing notes down to go check it out after this.
Like I live in Toronto, I'm Canadian, obviously. So we're like root vegetable apple people, you know? So when I went to California for the first time and saw a fucking lemon tree, I lost my shit. I just like skirt pulled over and was like, lemons grow on trees, like citrus. Never seen an orange tree. Some more tropical places, you see the banana trees. And like, I just think that's the funnest part of traveling. Like we've all seen a freaking banana, but like something about seeing the trees or kiwi. When I saw a kiwi tree for the first time, that was off-putting. They're weird. They're really weird.
I've never seen one.
It's just
I love a good kiwi tree. They're wild. Yeah. It's just balls, hairy balls hanging everywhere. Yeah.
That's what I imagine.
It's exactly what you think it would look like.
I was a teenager, I was into like punk rock and skateboarding and disposable, like those yellow disposable Kodak cameras were like available, you know, and I went to like a lot of punk rock shows in Seattle. And so I'd always have like one of those little disposable cameras, the point and shoots, you know, taking pictures of like day-to-day life, just, I don't know, for fun, I guess. And in high school, my junior year, I took a film class where we did black and white development and film photography. And then actually, if I wind up a little bit, my first high school was in Tacoma, and it was like a larger high school. And then I moved to Port Townsend High School, which is a tiny town on the Olympic Peninsula. And my school, the first school I went to was Franklin Pierce, and that had like, I don't know, 2,000 kids. The second school had like 400 or something. And so I had enough credits to graduate, but I just didn't have like certain classes to graduate. So I was able to just take all art elective classes. And so I did like film and video and digital photography and like welding and wood shop and like all different types of classes like that. And really got into content creation or photography at that time in my life. And I went on to college to a trade school for automotive painting. Did that and actually moved to LA to like work in paint shops, and got tasked of doing the product photography of it, and just handed like some digital camera. I was like, you're going to take the pictures. And I was like, oh, okay. And kind of like brought back the feeling of photography as like an art form. And when I moved to Las Vegas when I was 21, bought my first like DSLR and started taking like travel pictures when I go out on like hikes and other things like that. And then got introduced to an older friend who is like a professional photographer who he mentored me along the way. And he was into more like model photography and boudoir and like types of that, like think like Vegas types of photography, I guess, you know. And I got linked in with this website called modelmayhem.com, which is like a network for photographers, creatives, makeup artists, like anything down that like realm. And I could just link up with like amateur models who wanted to do like trade for print, was like the terminology. And it's just like you get their time, they get the photos, and you work on projects or whatever. And so I would just like think of these concepts of like what would be like this cool photo with this type of a person. I'd search for that type of a person and then just go create different photo shoots and upload it to Model Mayhem. And this was all just before social media, and it just like did that, you know? And like that's where like I learned like studio lighting, was shooting outdoors with lighting and indoors with lighting and doing that. But then shooting with like people in that region where it's like very superficial and like everybody is like, oh, like, can you change this about my body, or can you do this? And I got like a little burnt out on like photographing people in that sense.
Yeah, for weed, you just have to pull the buds off, and you're in pretty good shape.
And like you can smoke them, you know. So that's like how I got started.
How did you make that leap into the weed?
Well, I've always been smoking weed, so I always enjoyed weed and used it as like a tool for creativity or whatever else, you know. And I just never really thought about photographing the weed and, you know, incriminating myself or whatever. And I moved from Las Vegas to San Diego, and weed was like pretty illegal in Vegas when I was living there. And I had like my person I went to, and that was cool. And when I moved to San Diego, I found out that you could just go on Hello MD and get your med card and just like have a Zoom meeting with a doctor, and then like order weed on Weed Maps like the same day and get it delivered. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. Like, I'm going to try this out. And it fucking worked. And like, I went on the Weed Maps, and the pictures were just awful. It was also a very interesting time in my life because I was like in my late 20s, and I'd been working nearly the past like 10 years in like food and beverage, in anything from like fine dining to like bartending to nightclubs and day clubs. And I was getting kind of burnt out on that scene. The money was like great, and the schedules were flexible, and it allowed me to like really pursue a lot of my creative stuff. But I was always struggling with like, well, how do I be like a creative photographer, like full-time professionally, especially with the iPhones releasing and like everything else, and cameras were just so accessible and everybody's a photographer, right? When I moved to San Diego, I moved there to work at a nightclub, got juiced in with like a Vegas brand that I was working for, and opened up a nightclub there. And I also applied for a part-time photography position working at the Audi dealership. So I was doing commercial product automotive photography, and then the nightclub and a day club. And then when I ordered weed, I was like, man, there's no pictures, or these pictures, like, you can't really tell what's going on. I bet I could like take better product photos. So I ordered like 4 or 5 different strains from this delivery company called Green Energy Meds. And they had really fire weed and stuff I'd just never seen or heard of. And I this like white glossy IKEA table, and I had my studio lights, and I was like, well, I'm just gonna like see what happens. And took some pictures and sent them to the delivery guy, and was like, yo, like, how about we build out your menu, and like we do like a trade where I get a free 1/8 for every photo and your menu gets built. And he was like into it. And I was trying to like figure out just like how macro photography works. And that's how I got started with cannabis as a subject.
Wow. Started trading 8s for photos.
Yeah.
The thing that I really like about your story is that you were like, okay, being a travel photographer is kind of the end goal. And I'm always just going to keep the photography thing going, even if it's not my main gig, even if I have to go like, you know, get a paycheck somewhere. You are always still working the photography angle. That's really great to like stay consistent with that. And even in times where you're like, look, this can't be my number one thing, but it still has to be in the picture. I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, and that, thank you. And that year, I just like made an ultimatum with myself where I was like, if I don't make 50% of my income from photography, then I'm just gonna go back to college for like X-ray technician or something that's like kind of photo, kind of security. Like I don't know. That's like what made sense to me at the time. And then I made more than 50% of my income and really thought that cannabis as a subject was going to be something much bigger than anything I could imagine. And I lived in San Diego for about a year and a half, grinding the nightclubs and the day clubs and the car photography. Nobody wanted to pay cash for the weed photography. Everyone's like, weed sells itself. You're never going to make money. Nobody's going to pay for this. And I was just like, I think you're wrong. Like,
Yep.
cannabis is like any other type of commodity where you have to have pictures to sell it. Like, I don't care what it is. I made the decision to move to Oakland on a whim. It seemed like the Bay Area was like the mecca for cannabis, on the West Coast being so close to Northern California and still being like a city, right?
Yeah.
And moved up there and emailed like every cannabis company I could find. And one got back to me, which was Garden of Eden in Hayward, just a little south of Oakland. I got brought in there as like a part-time menu photographer. It was like a month of interviews. And like finally for the final interview, they handed me like a bunch of Sherbinsky's like weed. And I was like, what is this? There's branding and packaging. It was those like orange boxes and little tin jars,
Yes.
And I'm like gelato and Baccio gelato and Sherbinsky's and like this purple weed. I had like no idea what that was. And I was kind of blown away, and they were definitely flexing by giving me that too. And, honestly, I didn't even know how to capture trichomes. And they're like, we want you to capture trichomes. I was like, shit. All right, I got this. And I just rented this lens called a Canon 65 MPE, which is still the lens I use today for the super macro work. And it can go from like 1x to 5x. That lens is like 24 years old or something. Canon just never made a new one.
Wow.
And rented that and kind of like winged it and got the job.
For me, that's the most important lesson, is just being like, yes, I can do that. And then just like staying up all night to figure it out. I really love that shit.
Yeah. Lots of long nights and early mornings and just like troubleshooting, because there was no, like, besides like Eric, who I was inspired by a lot and looked up to, there was nothing really else as far as like how do you figure this out? Like I researched bug photography and like looked at that and found out like it kind of applied to cannabis, but not really.
That was a really creative idea.
Well, with the book project and everything, it seems like now the thing you're focused on is creating projects for yourself or from yourself, and less like, okay, I'm going to have to hustle up this next season. I'm sure it's a combination of both, but where do you see like this going in the next few years?
Yeah. So I think we all know that the cannabis industry is struggling as a whole, and that ripples out to like everybody involved, especially here in California. At least as like a photographer, I had to pivot to other ways with like budget cuts and stuff. And I'm just like really interested in the storytelling aspect of things. And now, I mean, it's been pretty apparent for a long time how much like cannabis connects all different types of people from all different walks of life. I think one of the big like moments that dawned on me was when I was like ripping dabs with Steve Cantwell of Green Light Productions, one of my really good clients in Vegas. And he's a retired UFC fighter, and he's just like a fucking big dude and like super fucking cool. And I'm just like ripping dabs with him, and me just thinking like, man, I just like came from a farm up in Humboldt with some like hippies and like their naked kids like running around, the plants growing in there. Now I'm like taking dabs with a retired UFC fighter. Like this is like fucking crazy, right? And by the way, he does like indoor no-till, which is like super sick. And so it has like its own like polyculture stuff going on in there. Ultimately, like what I want to do is keep servicing farms with the harvest as it makes sense, but then documenting cannabis culture globally with an editorial photography approach matched with my studio photography. And that was the approach I took in Jamaica, was shooting like it's not like lifestyle, but it's like editorial, right? Where the people who own the farm, like the people, the place, and the plant type of thing, and doing portraiture and then matching that people portraiture with the flower portraiture.
Wow.
And
it's editorial, but there's a lot of like visual concepts that are cohesive throughout the whole project, which I think was a really interesting approach.
Yeah, creating publications like coffee style art books matched with PhDs working on scientific papers, and then ideally having exhibits that we can travel and talk about from like our different perspectives of like a PhD in botany and then like a self-taught photographer.
That's as good as it gets right there, right? I mean, I can't wait for the coffee table book just because I love like a centerfold, like a really like just beautiful bud shot. We're talking about Eric Nugshots. His book is a really prime example of that. I mean, if you just leave it around on your coffee table, even my mother-in-law would pick it up and be like, oh, these are pretty. So, you know, even the novice can appreciate shots like that. But I do think when we get into like the storytelling and the science behind this rapidly evolving industry, there's a lot of really deep stories to tell. So I'm here for all of it. Any other projects from like the last couple of years that really stand out to you? Or, you know, what I want to do is corner you at a party and ask you about all of the individual joints that you've smoked and which stood out. I know this is not the best platform for that, so, you know, we'll save that. But I do want to hear about the big things that stood out to you.
Well, I mean, the New York project was super huge. Like over the years, I've had some projects that have been just really cool. In San Francisco, I worked at a microbrewery. I bartended like part-time, and this was probably in like 2017. We were able to do like a terp beer, like a terpene beer with real cannabis terpenes. It was like a fresh hop beer, and I got to shoot fresh hops the same way that I shoot cannabis, and then do like this little exhibit comparing cannabis to hops and to the microform. And so like they're related plants, and inside of hops are little glands called lupulin, which look like little neon green stalkless trichomes that are more rectangular, I guess. So that was like pretty fascinating to do that. You know, traveling around is like probably the pinnacle of it all, like as far as exciting things, like being able to go share this flower with people. We don't really speak the same language, but we can connect over the same things. And like, it's really fascinating working with the craft farmers who have been in it through like legacy, and they're just pushing through and continuing on their path for the plant and like creating these really unique cultivars, you know, like Emerald Spirit or, you know, Humboldt Seed with the triploids and everything.
It's interesting because weed doesn't sell itself anymore. Like at all. There was a time where it did, but obviously photos make companies. Absolutely. And strains and cultivars. We talked about it with Amanda a couple weeks ago, hitting the angles, like brands who take a photo and they get the butt shot instead of the nug, you know, you get a little stem. You know, it's creative, but it's also just like there's so much artistry that goes into it. And I love that you're also manicuring. Like you have the eye, you know what should and shouldn't be in that nug shot.
Yeah, I would say when I did work with a company for a while, they had hired an agency, and I've talked to other brands that hired creative agencies. And it's not that these photographers or content creators or whatever are bad at what they do. They're actually like really exceptional, but they just are working with a product they're very unfamiliar with. So like it would be the same thing. Like if somebody gave me some medical device and was like, oh, shoot this like this, and I have no idea what it is. Maybe I'm taking a picture of the wrong screw, right? But since I love weed and I've been around it for so long, it has a face. Like there's a front, there's a back, there's like the bottom and the top. You have to know about different virus things or insects or pests or other deficiencies that could be going on with the plant, and knowing whether to shoot that or not, or for like what purpose, right? You can definitely tell when someone who isn't that familiar with herb is taking pictures of it. There's this like interesting balance between photography experience, creativity, and then just the know of the plant. There's some where like you can just tell, like I've seen these like lifestyle photographers that have, it's like a phenomenal photo, but the person is holding the weed wrong. You know what I mean? Like we know how to hold it, you know, or like break it up, or they're holding the joint wrong. I mean, not that there's like a wrong or a right way, but there is.
No, there is. Yeah, we were walking through the like international like wing of an airport recently, and there was a photo of a woman eating a slice of pizza, and she was holding it from the top, both hands on the slice, and just like askew at it. And my whole family didn't have to say anything. We all stopped and looked at each other like, what is going on here? This is so wrong. And so now that's just like a family joke that we have. We're just like, look at each other holding pizza like the entirely wrong way because it's so obvious. And I think that's like, you know, the more we talk to people who've really made their own careers, I think becoming like a quick learner and understanding your subject more deeply than say somebody, a videographer who has more years of experience. If you can show up and provide a quality product, your knowledge is going to be so much more valuable. And I think that's why people like us who are quick learners, who are in the industry, who are like really going after something can really prove their worth to some of these bigger companies or ad agencies or anybody who doesn't quite get it the way we do. It's wild how valuable that is in any industry. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think intuition plays a large role into that. And that is just like from experience and just like using it and being around it. Because I remember when I was shooting like the part-time menu photography stuff, like flower rosin, like pressed flower was really big and like shatter. And I had never even seen anything like that before. I've always been like a flower guy. It's like, man, like what is this? Like, it's just this sticky sap looking thing like on a piece of paper. And I had no idea how to shoot it. And I really struggled with it. And the photos were pretty awful. And I've been more into hash and rosin and stuff over the past, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now. So now when I shoot it, it's very, very different. And I think the photos like are just so much better.
Yeah. I miss those shots of crispy shatter with fingerprints on them though. I never put anything up like that, but that was rampant on social media a few years ago.
Oh, it's hilarious.
Well, right on, man. I'm really glad we got to sit down and talk with you basically while you're in between editing. So thanks for taking the time today. Show us where we can find you and look up your projects.
Yeah, man, it's been great. I really appreciate you guys having me on. You can find me at kandidkush.com or at Kandid Kush, and that's KANDIDKUSH. On any social platforms, I have the same username, Kandid Kush. And yeah, I run them all. So.
Oh, that's a full-time job in its own, man. Yes. I can't even imagine band maintenance on top of that, right?
That's so great. Well, yeah, thanks so much for talking to us today, Chris. I'm feeling inspired.
Yeah, me too.
Fully inspired, and I'm ready to pack my bags. Let's fucking go.
Yeah, you should come out to Spain in March.
There you go.
Know, Spain has been on my list for quite a while. And
have you never been?
Ryan knows I was this close a couple months ago because I bopped over to Europe, but we never made it to Spain. And I even have friends there, squatting and non-squatting friends. Maybe March is the time. Maybe that's my next destination.
Definitely. You should definitely cruise over to Barcelona in March for Spanibus. I would say the surrounding events are more the reason to go. Food is incredible. And then you could pop over to Lisbon, is really fun and affordable too.
I'm half Portuguese, so those are my people. And what's cool about Spain is the dispensaries are buying homegrown. So like if you're just growing in your backyard, you can sell that to dispensaries. That is variety at its finest. So it's on my list.
No, it's dope. You should do it. Dope.
Word. Well, you can find us on all the things at the.smoking-spot. And yeah, this has been a really great conversation. I'm looking forward to even more next week. We'll be back. I hope you'll be joining us. We really like those 5 stars. Go share us with your friends, do all that stuff. Thanks, everyone.
Said no matter what kind of pain and anguish life may bring you, Oh, smoke it up, hold it down, and don't ever stop. Well, you can always find your smoking spot. Yeah, you can always find your smoking spot.
Hey, Smoking Spot fans! We're here to tell you about the newest launch from Centelligence Projects.
Over the last year, we've created the Cannabis Aroma Wheel. It's a sensory tool designed to help connoisseurs take their knowledge to the next level. So whether you're a bud tender, dispensary owner, cultivator, or you just love the smell of weed, you can better appreciate the cannabis in front of you.
Get your copy of the most detailed sensory tool built specifically for the cannabis industry and order your Cannabis Aroma Wheel today at centelligenceproject.com.